So here's a blast from the past. Something no one would probably ever expect to see a review on, or at least a new review on, for something from so long ago. This, as you can already tell, is a Viper PST, but it is not the Gen 2 that is so loved and famed by all. No, this is a Gen 1. And there's a good reason why I'm reviewing a Gen 1. You see, I bought this scope specifically for a rifle that I bought a few years ago. And I already had a set of rings for it that just so happened to match up perfectly with it. But there was one caveat. I needed a front objective that was less than 40 millimeter. And I wanted a magnification range with the lower number being less than 4 and the top number being around 10. Why? Well, I'm a psychopath and I used to love playing Counter-Strike. I was a big 1.5 and 1.6 guy. I was near pro. I was in a couple of clans. It was great. And my favorite rifle to use was the Schmidt Scout, which was a copyright infringement on the Steyr Scout. Well, I just so happened to buy a Steyr Scout in 308 a couple of years ago for a really smoking deal, and I needed to put an optic on it. So I had the rings already, and I needed something that was going to clear the front objective, have the right magnification range, because in the game you had low and high magnification. 2.5 to 10 would be perfect, and I wanted it to be small and lightweight. I also wanted something with illumination and something that I can dial up for long distance shots. If you'd watched my loopholed VXR 4-12 video that I reviewed a while ago, I had bought that originally for my Scout, but it just wasn't ideal. This thing popped up and I threw it on right away, and it's been on there ever since. The only reason why I took it off was because I decided to change the rings up a little bit, and I figured while I wait for the new rings to come in and the scope's off, why don't I do an unboxing and a full review of it? Anyway, you can still find these for around $400 to $500, which you might be saying is a lot of money. But I bet once we're done with this unboxing, you might think otherwise. There's everything you're going to need to know about this particular model. It is a first focal plane, which was something I am a huge fan of, and it is in mil, which again, I'm a huge fan of. Popping the top off, this being a used scope when I first bought it, it's probably missing a couple things, but it has everything I need, which is the scope, and then the zero shim, or the shims for your zero stop. We'll take a look at this in a little bit. I'm assuming at one point this was sent back into VORTEX for an inspection, thus why there is a card in there. Box out of the way. I'm not going to go too much over these manuals because if you can't understand how this all works, you should be in a different field. So, in short, this is as simple as a scope as one can get. It's also pretty small, pretty lightweight, functions well, and has some really great features. What is there not to like? Right off the bat is the weight, and this thing is very light by comparison to, I'll pull out its bigger, older brother, the Gen 2 3-15. This little Gen 1, as a comparison, comes in at 19.2 ounces, whereas its larger brother comes in a whopping 10 ounces heavier. Granted, there is a 2.5 to 10 version of the Gen 2, which I didn't bother buying because this thing is so good, I don't know if it's really worth it. Plus the Gen 2s, as you just saw, are noticeably heavier. And I was looking for small, lightweight, practical, and affordable. This thing hit all of the marks. Starting with the back, you have a typical fast focus eyepiece. And just like every single one, I'm not the biggest fan of them. I'd much rather have a locking eyepiece like you find on a lot of the loopholed options, but it is what it is. At least with this one, we back it all the way out, put it in a little bit, and even though this is an old scope that's been used and abused, it is still rock solid tight. It feels absolutely beautiful, and it's actually hard to turn this thing. A lot of scope manufacturers, including VORTEX with their Razor HDs, these are too easy to turn. And what happens is, with me especially, I've noticed it several times now, if you're not running a cap, which I'm going to have to start doing to mitigate it, the brim of your hat, whenever you go on the scope, will actually touch it and turn it. It's happened to me more than once, and it's really frustrating. What was actually pretty common about scopes of old was having the illumination controls being on the rear ocular housing. This one has a range from 1 to 10 with offs in between, and you know what? Despite being used, again, very, very frequently, this thing feels pretty good. You can see there's some play side to side once it's inside of its proper detent, but once it's there, it's not going anywhere. You really need to put pressure and effort into this to turn it properly. It's perfect. Also, when it's all the way back here and you're looking past it, it does block a little bit of your elevation controls, but you can still see it fairly easily enough. Magnification ring goes from 10, which I should have set this already, to 2.5. But if you didn't notice that, 2.5 is at 12, 10 is way over here. It's way outside of 180 degrees. It's really tight and it has a good amount of resistance on this. Again, from here, we're going to check out the parallax controls, which, as you can see, go down to 35 yards and go all the way up to infinity. Well, actually, past infinity. It's a little bit less than 270 degrees from minimum to maximum, so there is a little bit of fine-tuning you have to do, but at least you have the adjustability of it. Damping on this thing is really, really good. There's still plenty of life in this thing. It requires you to actually physically needing to turn this for it to turn. It's not going to get bumped from the recoil and then change on you ever. Feels incredibly smooth with no hiccups or bumps in between. It's basically perfect. It actually goes a little bit below 35 yards, but I never have to go that low. Now, with the elevation and the windage, we do have these nice exposed turrets. They are not locking, but they do have a zero stop. But it's not a zero stop like you see most scopes now, where you have different set screws that you can clock it and whatnot. With this scope being old school, it uses, like I showcased earlier, these brass shims, which go under the cap when you get to the right height. I have it set up so it's got a little bit of play before it, because I don't want to jam this thing right as I'm getting to zero. Nevertheless, the turrets on this thing are fantastic. Beautiful detents, good sound, but once it's in there, it's in there. It requires a good amount of effort to really turn this thing and to get it into the position that you need it to be in. And it's really aided by this fantastic little splines that they put on all the controls. From the illumination, parallax, and both turrets, it feels absolutely fantastic. It's razor sharp. Well, it's not razor sharp or else you'd be cutting yourself, but it's really, really deep grooved and sharp with a good edge so you can really get a good purchase on it. Windage turret, exactly the same as the elevation, with a left and a right one off of zero, and big words right with an arrow pointing down, big up with an arrow pointing right, where you know where you're going to turn this, where you're going to move your point of impact to your point of aim. All right, so enough talking about this thing. Let's look through it. All right, starting at 2.5x at our 35-yard power transformer, you see a beautiful image looking through the scope. However, what you also see is not just that massive bulge in the top left indicating your illumination control, but the large amount of the scope body around it. Illumination is unfortunately a little weak, but what can you expect out of a scope like this that's this old on a very bright sunny day? However, unlike the Credo 2 to 10 that I just reviewed, the side focus on this allows us to actually focus at our maximum magnification, no matter what the distance is, because the minimum 35 yards this thing is rated for, as you can see here at this 30-yard power transformer, looks absolutely fantastic. And I'm delighted to say that the good news doesn't stop there. As we focus our attention on the 400-yard brick building, I bring up the magnification all the way up to 10, and I adjust the side focus to give you an absolutely beautiful image. It is sensational. It truly is something to behold, especially for the price and the age of this thing. However, that's exactly where I'm going to end this video for right now. Stay tuned for the full review coming soon, because I have a lot more good things to say about this beauty. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next time. And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.